Kevin's professional bio is available on the website. And if you know anything about me, you know that when I sat him down at dinner, I did not ask him about his profession at all. Because I was looking for jokes, as usual. So I asked him what the 3 things we should know about him were if I were to introduce him, to which he sufficiently bored me to death with how perfect his life is. And I found no jokes. First, he says people should know that I have 2 girls, children, and they are... You're welcome, Kevin. And their ages... You really couldn't. And their ages were 6 and 4. Yes, he looks about my age, which is really old. And then at the bitter end, he tried to recover and was like, I have done karaoke on 4 continents. I was very proud of it. At the end, he's going to sing a little bit. And then he tried to tell us, now he has come here from Dallas. He's from Texas. He's arrived from Texas. But he tried to tell me that he was a big Blackhawks fan. Because he's originally from Chicago. I think he's hiding because he knows he's from Chicago. But then later on, he admitted that he was a White Sox fan, and my wife almost sent him into an early grave in favor of the Cubs. And then lastly, he admitted to having an irrational love for the television show American Ninja Warriors. So we asked him if he was exercising or training, and he said no. To which I say, Kevin, I hope that at the very minimum at this forum, you aspire, inspire, and achieve. But the one thing that I would say that I want you to know about Kevin in the last few minutes of knowing him is that he is a humble being with the goals to come up here and be the first speaker for the weekend forum. And so please congratulate him and invite him. And welcome whatever he has to say. Kevin Murphy, everyone.
Thanks, I think. First of all, can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Let me know if you can, because they're only about halfway turned up. They can do more if they need to. So, first thing I want to thank Bill Bellows and the whole In2In Thinking team for inviting me here. I'm really excited to be here, speak to you guys. Question, how many have been to any type of Deming seminar before? Okay, the most. Well, can the people raise their hands they haven't? Just so I can, okay. Just so I have an idea, you know, if I say, oh, the red bead experiment, well, that's not going to make sense to certain people if you haven't been. So I'll try to make sure that I explain thoroughly enough so you're like, well, I have no idea what you just said. So, you know, I call this application and lessons of Deming's perspective on leadership. You can see from my bio that I went to the Fordham Deming MBA Deming Scholars Program at Fordham. I actually sought it out. I got into Deming and quality, the company I was at, an industry called converting, which is packaging essentially, putting different layers of plastic together, packaging the medical industry, and I was in quality there, and really found it. Professor at Michigan at Rothman led a study group in the area, and started talking to him, and he said, hey, there's this great program at Fordham. And so I went there and studied under George Sorsini, and I was one of the two best years of my life. And then I ended up at GE in the Six Sigma program, and luckily at Aircraft Engines, the guys running it, Deming had been there. And so they're like, yeah, we know some of the stuff we're kind of going through doesn't exactly match up, so I kind of hit it off with some of those guys there. And that was actually a really good experience, just to be in a company like GE, just a different perspective for me. I started in a small company. Well, I ended up in Texas, in Dallas, with GE. And over time, GE decided they didn't want to be in our industry anymore. And I was lucky enough to be part of a management team buyout. We found an investor at a bank, and we were able to buy out the company. Now there was a number of us, so it wasn't just me saying, telling everyone what to do and trying to apply Deming's thinking at the company, because there was a president there, investors, and so forth. But it was a great opportunity to try to apply a lot of Deming's thinking. 4 years later, then we sold to a company called Triumph, based out of Philadelphia. It's all aerospace, just like our company. Good thing is they're very decentralized, so we retain a lot of the decision making in our company. There are, of course, some things that go with being part of a corporate entity, but could be a lot worse, I'll tell you that. So anyway, that's a little bit about myself. That's kind of in the bio. And I'm going to give you some background on the company, so that when I kind of start talking about some of the things we've tried to do and some of the lessons learned, you'll kind of know how it fits in. So, the company is called Triumph Accessory Services Grand Prairie. There's another Triumph Accessory Services in Kansas. So, our official name has the dash Grand Prairie, with Grand Prairie is a city right outside Dallas. Let's see, we provide long-term reliable accessory power to the large commercial aircraft engine market. I kind of went through that. Well, let's see here. Accessories are kind of the components that hang on the outside of an engine, and they provide power, they regulate the fuel delivery, start up the engine. They do, so they're not the blades or anything that rotates. It's kind of everything that makes things happen on the engine. So things like fuel pumps, starters, hydraulic pumps, vibration sensors, everything that kind of goes on the outside there. And what the company does is repair and overhaul these components. And just a little history, and I kind of joined right when it was GE there. Actually started working with a company from Cincinnati, from the headquarters in Cincinnati in 1998. And then I'm moving now full-time in production capacity. So yeah, I was part of the Six Sigma program helping improve things, and I'm thinking, wow, this is great, but I want to help drive this improvement. So when I got the opportunity, that was something I had always wanted to do, so I jumped at it. Our customers are pretty much the major aviation customers around the world. There's really three or four types of customers we have. The airlines you all know, Southwest, American Airlines, KLM, Air France. Now, the difference between those is someone like KLM and Air France, they overhaul, they repair their own planes, their own engines. American Airlines does too. Someone like Southwest, their business model is, hey, let's outsource. So what does Southwest do? They send their engines to GE, to NTU maintenance inside of Germany. So there are third-party providers and OEM providers like GE that will overhaul the engine, something like American does it themselves. There are so many components on an engine that American, they're not going to fix everything on it. So we will get components from American, and lots of components from GE, in all these companies. Then there are companies like, down in the end, you see AJ Walter, and they're based out of the UK. And in our tarmac and there's a maintenance problem, and all of a sudden they need a starter, they rotate in a new one. Well, a company like H.A. Walter will provide, they do asset management for airlines around the world. And they're brokers too, they'll buy, sell, and trade components. So there's a big, big market for buying, selling, and trading aviation parts around the world. So we have some sales guys that are almost, they're almost kind of like stockbrokers. Hey, what's the price on this today? And what can I buy this for? And, interesting how over time, as planes get torn down and put in the market, your inventory all of a sudden can plummet in value. You've got cost in it. And there are people that just make a living doing this, buying, selling, and trading parts. So it's a very vibrant market with a lot going on. In fact, before the internet, there were dot matrix printers that were spitting out reams and reams of parts. And they had just gotten rid of those when I joined. And really, one of the biggest users in the world of the internet initially was aviation parts websites, with all these people going on and trying to find parts and so forth. My company is part of a larger company called Triumph Group, based out of Philadelphia. It's New York Stock Exchange listed company, TGI. Really, it started as a holding company. They just lots of aviation companies. Everybody had their own name, and it said, a Triumph Group company. Right when we sold to Triumph, they said, we're going to try to do a little more. So everybody's got to take the Triumph name. So Triumph is a $4 billion company. It's got like 48 sites. But what their mantra, philosophy is respect the integrity of the individual company while taking advantage of being part of a larger organization. So they try to buy companies that are doing well, and then they don't come in and change things, they kind of leave you alone. They do some things over time, but they don't come in and change your ERP system and all that. They pretty much left us alone, for about 80% of what we do. And just real quickly, it's kind of divided into three groups. The two left-hand groups are OEM manufacturing companies. There's Aerostructures and then Aerospace Systems. So Aerostructures does, here, and I fit in over here in aftermarket services, so maintenance, repair, and overhaul. And this is just an idea of some of the things we do. So we're doing in systems and controls, like heat exchangers and gearboxes, actuation and motion control systems. Under structures, we're doing wings and empennage, which is the tail section. Nacelles and helicopter cabins, fuselages. So Boeing and Bombardier are huge customers. Also, U.S. military, big customer. And then in maintenance, repair, and overhaul, we do accessories like my company does. We do things like APUs, which are auxiliary power units, nacelles and whole thrust bursters, interiors, so when they refurb a cabin, a lot of the parts in there. Instruments, we actually don't do those anymore. They just sold that company. But, and then accessories. My company does engine accessories, and then our sister company does airframe accessories. And when we were part of GE, naturally they focused us on the engine. So the engines we focus on are large commercial aircraft engines. And that go on like the 737, the Airbus A320, 747, 767, A319, A320, A321. What that really is a list of GE engines. And then the CFM is a partnership between GE and a company called Snecma out of France. And then the V2500 is actually where we branched outside of GE. So we do, like I said, fuel systems, so fuel flow transmitters, fuel pumps, main engine controls, heat exchangers, oil systems, like lube and stabbage pumps, pressure pumps, pneumatic components, starters, valves, actuators. Hydraulic components, like hydraulic pumps and actuators, electrical components, speed sensors and generators, gearboxes, and then we do individual bearing and gear inspections. So we'll do main engine bearings in a clean room, clean them, push them through a mirror lock, and inspect all the bearings, send them back. So, pardon me, just for a second, I'm going to catch up here. So, when I finally, took the job at Dallas and went in, I was like, well, how am I going to be able to, what am I going to do? I'm going to try to apply everything I was thinking. And, being in a position of leadership, said, hey, there's three sources of power that a leader has. Use it with three. Your position, so your authority, your title, essentially. The knowledge you have, and your ability to attack and to persuade people to move forward, whether it's your point of view or to try to do some type of project. And the job of a leader is to use these three sources of power to transform your organization. So what are we doing when we're trying to transform the organization? Well, we're first trying to establish an atmosphere. What are things going to be like in the company? And we'll kind of talk about what type of atmosphere should we create and what type of atmosphere is normally created a little bit later. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of background just on how we accomplish work in our company. So when I talk about some of the individual things we're doing, it kind of fits in. This is just kind of the main source of how we do work. So a unit, any type of unit, a fuel pump, starter, something comes in the door, and we might have to test it. So there are three different ways a unit goes out the door, if it's good in the end. You might send in something and you test it. We test it, and it's good. It goes out as expected. Might come in and you say, you know what, test and repair it as necessary. Make it a serviceable part. And that's the parlance in our industry. So we'll test it, and then if it fails, we repair it, and it goes out serviceable. Or you might send it in and say overhaul, which is the highest level of repair. So it goes out as overhaul. Well, so the first thing we might do is test a component. If it fails, or if you ask for overhaul right away, we're just going to go tear it down. The interesting thing in our industry is as you can imagine, aircraft operate in all sorts of different environments. And depending on the maintenance organization, they have a lot of latitude to decide when, they work up what we call the work scope, what's going to be done and when it's going to be done. So you might say, oh, these guys, Southwest, for instance, they pull off things early. So when it comes in, it's in good shape. Some people run it, hey, we're going to run this thing until there's an indication we have to take it off. So you get units that are in all sorts of different conditions and shapes. So to tear it down, one might come apart really easily. Another one, you're saying, I can't get this apart. I have to take it over and use vices and hammers, and there's oil soaked on it, and it's really hard to get apart. So there's a lot of variation in the tear down portion. Then we clean and inspect the component. So you'll clean it per a manual, and we follow all of our, most of our work instructions are done per a manual written by the designers of those components. So we'll clean it according to how they want us to clean it. Then we'll inspect it. Inspection, depending on the part, could be visual, could be dimensional, or you might do something what's called fluorescent penetrant. It's almost like developing a picture you put on a developer under black lights, and it'll show you cracks that you can't see with a naked eye or even magnification. Or it might require X-ray. Anyway, so that helps you identify good parts and bad parts. So then you divide those parts into 3 piles, essentially. Your rejected parts, your parts that pass, which we now call serviceable. So they're going to go back into the unit. And then there might be parts requiring repair. The manual may say, oh, hey, if this one's bad, you can repair it. You can send it to get plated, nickel plated and machined or something. We have machine shops, so we can do a lot of the repairs ourselves in-house. But a lot of times, well, depending on what needs to be done, well, we might have to outsource to process specialists to get those types of things fixed. Next, you write up the findings. A mechanic will write up the findings they found and quote the unit. Now what we'll try to do here, I mentioned the large market of parts being traded all over. Here we might say, what's available? What's available out there, because we're competing with OEMs who are not only slow but typically expensive. And one of the reasons we exist is because we're faster, we have better service, and we're typically less cost. And one of the ways we do that is we find units on the market. Let's bring it in, take it apart, inspect it, let's get good parts out of it. And that typically costs a lot less than buying and maintaining new parts in inventory. And, obviously, going through your mind, like, well, depending, sometimes you go, you know what, you don't want to get serviceable on that part, you get new, because there might be, maybe the serviceable limits in practice aren't what they should be. You go, yeah, you got to get new on that one because you might end up with a warranty, quality problem, which is, in our industry, will kill you. If you start having issues with quality, especially in aviation, you're done. Assuming quote gets approved, or it might be flat rate, you just wait through. The parts are routed to repair, internally and externally. Meanwhile, the stockroom pulls the replacement parts. They'll be new. A lot of them are going to be new, and then some might be serviceable parts. Unit's assembled, and then unit is tested. And test is interesting because depending on the component, some parts just require a pressure check, or even a visual, hey, this is good. And they'll set up the test to essentially be tested under the conditions it's going to see in the aircraft. And then some parts require, hey, you have to run this for 5 hours, full data acquisition, full flight envelope. It's funny how that can even happen within the component. For instance, gearboxes. Like American's MD-80s that they fly all the time, those gearboxes are a pressure test. Then Saab A340, which is a propeller gearbox, we do those too, and that's a full 5-hour automatic data acquisition test on a $2 million piece of equipment. So back to, so now that you've kind of have the background, talk about some of the things we've tried to do, and kind of back to what Devin said on leadership here. Certainly brought a number of challenges, successes, and failures, but what you might rather call learning opportunities than failures. So, that being said, about measurements, the most important measurements are unknown and unknowable. For those of you that have never been to either read one of his books or read one of his seminars, what does he mean by that? Well, examples given are things like the multiplying effects of a happy or unhappy customer. It's really hard to determine what's the long-term effect of something like that. How do you even measure that? Yeah, you can make estimates, but they're probably going to be way off. Multiplying effects of an unhappy employee. And wow, I think everybody here has probably seen that. Sometimes when something isn't going right with an employee, it can affect everybody in so many ways. And it's really hard to know what's the total effect on your company. That's hard to measure. And certainly extremely important. The effects of suboptimal organizational design is one area. Too much prominence. They're trying to optimize that part of the company to the detriment of the rest. Pretty hard to measure what the true effect is. The true effect of a bad policy or policies. How does that ripple throughout an organization? And something like the improvement of quality of product from teamwork, people working together. It's really hard to measure the full effect of what's going to happen in your organization. But those things certainly are important. Debbie also said, hey, you can't measure them, but you can manage those things. Now, something that I kind of found a little bit is almost as important are measurements you can measure, and you could actively manage those, but you choose not to. So what you don't measure, certainly can be as important as what you do measure. And I'll give you an example. We overhaul a component called an In2In speed sensor. And by the way, we have the capability of overhauling about 1,000 different components. And when you take into consideration the different dash numbers and configurations, it's probably about 2,800 different configurations. They could come in the door under different work scopes. They could come in asking their service bulletin sometimes releases where they say, hey, we have this improvement. So really, if you talk about all the different ways a unit could come in the door and say, we want this done to it, you're talking thousands and thousands and thousands. And there's strategic reasons why we do that many different types of components, the way the market is. Maybe we can get into that, either questions or over drinks at the hotel. And then we're going to talk about here one part called In2In speed sensor. And the In2In speed sensor provides an electrical signal proportional to engine rotation speed. So it has connector assembly, which is right here, connectors. And there are wires in that connector that come down this tube, and there's a sensor on the end. Connects through to that sensor. And that sensor, this sits near the fan in an engine. And the sensor is mounted near what's called the phonic wheel. Anyway, it spins, and through changing the magnetic field, it's able to deliver an electrical signal that's proportional to the engine speed. And a few things about this component. So that connector there, let's say it comes in for overhaul. There's seals down inside the open connector there. Those seals have to be taken out. And the way you do that is you have to cut the connector off. When you cut the connector off, it exposes resin inside the connector assembly. Well, now you have to take that off. Now you've exposed the area. You must inspect it. That's a rule pretty much in aviation and anything. So now you're taking the guts out. Well, in the course of doing that, there's oil a lot of times that has gotten in there, and just the way it's taken apart, it wicks down the tube and can damage the sensor I showed you that was on the end. That sensor is like an $8,000 component. Where normally, we'd say, hey, this is a $1,500 repair or so. You can get some really expensive parts that fall out and drive the price way up. So this was kind of the state of what was going on with this part in March 2013. Kind of over 2 years, a lot of up and downs, and the turn time kind of looks like there's a trend, maybe that's just the linear fit. If you kind of look at the control chart, which for those of you that don't know that, it's just a way of determining, is there a statistical reason or is there statistical evidence that there's a change in your data? So is it bouncing up and down randomly, or did something change? And yeah, it does kind of look like something has changed here. And you can see that it's about 26 days on average with a lot of up and downs. Now, customers, by the way, those customers I showed you earlier, about 55% of our business is international. So we're supporting engines, and they're trying to turn these engines in 50 days back to their customers. Well, they send it over, get some customs, comes to us, we have to fix it, ship it all the way back. So when we're doing international business, people are screaming for their parts all the time when they're hitting the door. Hey, when are you going to deliver that to me? It hasn't even gotten here yet. You know, it's still in customs, but they're already asking for it. So with this component, customers are saying, man, you know, we're always having to call you for this. It's taking forever. You know, one day you say it's good, and then it's not good. The prices are than we expected too. Boy, these parts are falling out all the time. These sensors, tubes. Also, that component has a long tube. It's fragile, actually. If you handle it, so we send it to the machine shop, there might be handling damage sometimes. So customers are kind of not happy. Another thing, there's an outsourcing step in that component too. That sensor on the end, we can't put that on. It has to go through a process called electron beam welding, and we have to outsource that. You send it out for EB weld, but then guess what? It comes back, we put on a part of the sensor, we do what's called brazing on it, do some other things. We have to send it back for a second electron beam weld. Get it done again, and then sent back. So there's 2 outsourcing steps. There's machine shop. They're handling it. So sometimes we're in an argument with our supplier. You damaged it. No, we didn't. You know, it was fine when it left here. You damaged it. There's a lot of back and forth. Then we're telling the customer, oh, that part's bad now. So definitely a lot going on with this component. So start looking at some data here and there. Well, let's see. We were at March 2013, kind of where I was saying, hey, you know, turn time might be going up a little bit, but customers weren't happy anyway. Well, labor went from 8.9 hours to 12.7. That's a big increase. When you put this on a control chart, it pops also. You know, it's over a 35% increase. So you're going, oh, what's going on here? So one typical way of dealing with this would be to say, hey, what's the labor standard, right? What's going on here? Why are you taking so much time? You know, you might go out and say, what's the variance? Why? Really? You're taking that much time there and over 30 hours on this job? Look, there's nothing over 25 earlier. That might be a kind of a typical way of handling data like this. Now you look at total cost, there really isn't that much change over that whole period of time. And then it's interesting to look at the difference between grouping the data and doing the individuals. Those, remember I was telling you, those expensive parts kind of pop out. Grouped, they happen enough and frequently enough that group and don't pop out. But there isn't that much change over time. However, an interesting thing happened. March 2013, so this is third time, we had a huge dip. And I mentioned it was at 26 days. Since March 2013 to 2015, we've been at 12 days. So that's an enormous drop in the turn time of the components. So what in the world happened? You know, here's another way to look at it. Just with the number of days at the bottom, and kind of the green bars is the new, and the orange bars is the old. That's the turn time through March 2013. That's the turn time since. Big day. Well, just as a recap on this part, you take that, you go into these connectors, cut it off in the machine shop, like the handling damage, take out the resin, take everything apart. Sensors, a lot of time damaged, so you got to take the sensor off, send it out, to electron beam well twice, back and forth. What was going on when those labor hours increased was that the team on the floor was experimenting. They're saying, what can we do to improve this? So they were trying all sorts of different things. So those two little things down there, as simple as they look, took them, there's a bunch of things they did. This one thing, they said, hey, this is like our 10th iteration on these tools. What they were doing was trying to figure out how do we get these seals out without having to cut that connector off. Because once we cut the connector off, that's got to be machined off, welded back on. You got to take the resin out. That starts a whole avalanche of things. Handling the unit, bending the tube, the probe. So they came up with what ends up being really simple tools. In the end, that helped preserve the connectors so we didn't have to cut it off. Another thing they did. They researched the resin. Said, you know, that's another thing. This resin requires a cure in an oven, and it's got to stay in there a day and a half. Well, they researched the resin and went, no, this resin isn't a time-based resin, it's thermally based. If it gets to the temperature, it's good. So even though we have to follow manuals, if there are small changes, because they're not all written perfectly. A lot of the manuals are written when they design the part. They go, we think this is how you repair it, and they put it out there. So sometimes there's things you got to fix and mistakes. Well, there's engineering clarifications you can do too. Well, so if we figure out how to get this thing to 212 degrees, we don't have to have it in there 36 hours. So they started looking at different ways to do this. And they were experimenting. How do we do this? Hair dryer. Maybe we can do it with a hair dryer. Well, that didn't work out so well. You crank the oven more. It didn't work. They ruined a few things, a few parts here and there. Tried fixtures, different things in the oven. Well, what they ended up doing was they preheated the component in the oven, and then maybe they'd fill out the quote, do whatever. They might even sit overnight. And they came in and they pour in the resin one layer at a time, hit it with hair dryer or a heat gun, industrial heat gun, which is really a fancy hair dryer, and do it one level at a time, and then just finish it for 1 hour in the oven. So they barely had to touch this, barely had to touch it anymore. And our costs plummeted. Average of 1404, with big variations because of the sensors that fall out, sometimes they're expensive. Actually that doesn't even capture the real cost of those expensive parts, because sometimes we were finding them cheaper. I was saying we could go out in the market and buy stuff. So we were always scrambling. Did you find one for less? Yes, we did. So the effort in the company going around to try to fix these things was enormous. Meanwhile, these guys are doing this stuff we don't even know. And all of a sudden, pow, hey, look what we did. And it dropped, 1404 to 388. That's an enormous 60% drop in cost. And if you kind of look at the control chart of that, there's a point outside, but the interesting thing is, this is through 2015. We're getting signals down at the end here, they're still improving it. Just, they kept working at it. Now, the nice thing, we're reducing costs. Our volume's gone up. Now, there's some seasonal effects in here, but generically, our volume has gone up and we've been able to maintain it. We couldn't have done that many units back in 2011, 2012, and complete and utter failure. There's no way, without a lot more resources thrown at it, we couldn't process that type of volume. Well, why? The question is, why do they do this? Well, we don't really have labor standards, per se. We don't do that. We don't look at variance to standard in our company. We have rules of thumb. I mean, a starter shouldn't take 80 hours, somewhere 15 to 20 when someone's trained. You should be down in that area unless there's something very strange going on. Demi had mentioned, variances to standard, things like that, as a force of destruction. And I would agree. I've had to answer lots of variances to corporate on financial stuff, and it's a game. I don't know. I'll figure out what can I answer, right? Come up with something that sounds good. But we don't do that. So when they started experimenting and failing, there wasn't someone in their face saying, hey, why'd you take 20 hours instead of 12 hours? Because if you have something like that going on, you're much less apt to, well, I'm not going to do that again. Boy, my idea didn't work. And I got in trouble for it. I'm just going to meet 12 hours however I can. Another related one, indirect labor versus direct labor. So if you're in a manufacturing environment, production environment, if you're working on the job, it's direct. If you're doing something else, cleaning, have nothing to do, training, whatever it is, it's indirect. Well, we're really not sticklers for this at all. Yes, it's looked at, but it's rare that anyone ever goes out and says, hey, you don't have anything to do, tell us, we can train, clean, doing something. But, when you focus on indirect versus direct labor, it's a game. People play games and go, well, I can't sit on the indirect job too much. I'll make sure I stay on this job longer. Stay on the direct job longer. Yeah, I can squeeze another hour in here. Let's say production standard's 12, and I did 10 and a half. Then I can put another hour in here and make sure I'm not on the indirect. Especially in our company where you have 1,000 different components that can come in. You might get a flood of one type and then nothing. So there's a lot of shifting and moving of personnel. And it can easily happen where somebody runs out of something that they're not trained to do. Well, we can do training, but there's just a lot of things we can do. So we don't really focus on indirect labor versus direct labor. But I'll tell you, I think that's rare even in our world. In aviation, in maintenance and repair, where to me it makes no sense. There might be some settings where you're going to be more concerned about something like that, but in our setting, it makes no sense to do that. To me, it's a big waste of time. And, it becomes a game. And to me, it's not a productive game to play. Something else that I see a lot, and hopefully I don't lose people on this one. There's something called Simpson's paradox that I think crops up quite a bit when you're managing on a job. I'll try to explain it with a couple of examples. be on the lookout for it, because I definitely see it. So basketball, example. Front court is your center and your forwards, and they typically are closer to the basket. And they typically will make more shots because they're closer. Your backcourt are your guards, guys who are dribbling the ball more, they're further away, so they're not going to make as many. They're shooting from farther away. So an example here is, let's say through a certain point in the season, well, your front court is making 38% of their shots, backcourt 55%, actually reversed, but it'll still work. Field goal percentage 48.2%. The coach says, we gotta shoot better than this. Just not shooting very well. So hey, we're gonna change. I'm gonna take better shots. Everyone's gonna take better shots. So they do. The front court improves to 42%, the back court to 55%. But the overall goes down. Well, how's that? How's that possible? Each component improved, but the overall went down. Well, that's because there's what's called a lurking variable. Earlier, the guys who didn't shoot as well took 32% of the shots, and the guys who shot better took 68% of the shots. So, guys who were shooting better took more shots. Well, later, even though both of them improved, the guys who don't shoot as well took more shots. So even though both of them improved their percentage, unfortunately, the guys who don't shoot as well took more shots. So what you end up with is an overall worse field goal percentage. So let's take another example here. And this one is actually out of Wikipedia. I like that. I was like, oh, here's another good treatment for kidney stones. So here you got treatment A and treatment B. Well, treatment A for small stones, 93%. For large stones, 73%. Treatment B, worse in both small and large. But when you combine both together, all of a sudden treatment B looks better. And what's missing again is that lurking variable, the ratio, the percentage tested in that area. Lo and behold, looking at the In2In speed sensor data, one of the speed sensors, as we do about 8 to 10 different of them, different part numbers, kind of had something like that going on 2 months after the improvement. So, labor before, and I mentioned there were different work scopes. You can have repairs, you can have overhauls. Well, labor before was 8.3 hours. Labor after, about the same, 8.2. Repair got worse, 3.5 to 3.8. But the average plummeted. So it's almost the inverse, but it's kind of the same thing happening. If you were just looking at overhauls, you'd say, well, all that stuff you were doing didn't really improve anything. Wow, repairs, you made it worse. Your average is worse. How am I going to price this, etc. But because they eliminated so much work, there were a lot fewer overhauls. So overhauls ended up being just the stuff that really needed it. And where repairs were a little lighter before, now more stuff came into repair. So a lot more components were repaired now. So the average just dropped way down. And actually, this was after 2 months. If you go out to 4 or 6 and whatever, this paradox disappears and actually overhauls better and repairs better. But I did notice that back. It was like, wow, depending on how you manage the situation, you could get fooled. You could say, you're just making things worse. You're not meeting your labor standard. You're making your overhaul didn't improve. Your repair is worse. What are you doing? So you kind of have to decide, or when you're looking at data, what are you going to look at, the aggregate data or the partition data? You can decide what's going to make sense, and you kind of have to look for these things. I'll give you a vendor management example. Our supply, our sourcing group. Hey, how are we gonna look at, we have these different people doing things, how are they doing? Should we switch them? Is someone better at one thing than another? So they started looking at it. Wow, person A, when they place PO, their suppliers are on time a lot more than person B. Maybe they're ordering earlier, better, they're just doing a better job ordering. So they said, oh, okay. Well, is there something different about them? Come back later. Oh yeah, there is. Person A has more domestic suppliers, person B has more international. Oh, okay, well that could explain it. So that kind of tells you, well, now that you look at it that way, well, so then she went and divided up. Person A, they just didn't have all domestic, they had some international. Well, now they divided domestic and international separate. And person B's domestic and international separate. And lo and behold, the results were reversed. Oh, I thought person A was better, but really person B was better at domestic and international than person A. But it's a little further than that. Because then, went and divided it again. Said, well, let's divide up, what do you mean international? Asia, Europe, started dividing up the countries. Well, did that, and it all reversed again. Now, person A seemed like they were doing a better job. So, you can go through this, though, and run into this all the time, where you think you're looking at something and saying, oh, well, clearly I'm comparing two people, but a lot of times they don't have the same job. What they're looking at, what they're doing is different. And there's a lot of different ways to divide it up. Whether you want to do that in the first place is even a question. So once you get to the real answer, well, then what do? How's that going to help you? Are you using that to improve what you're doing? Or are you just trying to figure out who's better, A or B? But it is interesting that when you kind of divide and go through it all, there are so many different ways to slice things. You can make, well, now, through all the criteria, this person looks better than that person, or this process looks better than that process. And I definitely see that quite a bit. People are trying to compare people across different criteria. You can run into Simpson's paradox quite a bit. Okay, rewards. This is fun to do. Definitely run into different scenarios there. When I first arrived, there was an Employee of the Month award, attendance award, and don't want to go in and say, no, let's figure it out, let's talk about this. Now, quickly, what happened with the Employee of the Month award is went to a couple of those and stood in the back, and you hear, well, of course you got it. He's his buddy, a lot of grumbling, well, I'll never get that, A lot of people saying that. What did he get it for? Something, well, they didn't even notice what I did over here. Now, that's kind of typical. So honestly, that was pretty easy to get rid of. I did that. The attendance award, which seemed kind of weird to me, really, you want to give an award for showing up to your job, but whatever, they had one. And so, what was happening was people who were, the people who might show up late occasionally were screaming in the parking lot, jumping out of their cars, running in and clocking in, going back to their cars and parking them. And seriously, people almost got hit in the parking lot. People screaming in, try to get this accomplished. So definitely something that got rid of right away. That could cost a lot more than then it's worse, the injuries. And, you know, the other thing is, and I think this happened too, there's a couple clocks. I think people were checking in other people, hey, check me in, my body, well, but really you're kind of risking your job there doing things like that. And I'm sure that's a story that people are familiar with other places, but definitely there was, hey, I don't think he was here yet, but how come he's clocked in 10 minutes before? And they have this attendance award going, and you know, definitely can drive bad, you know, bad behavior. Two types of award, you know, two different types of rewards, really contingent rewards and surprise rewards. You know, I mean, it says as far as the literature too, all the psychology literature, contingent rewards are, you know, there's a much bigger problem with those. And the larger they are, and the closer in time they are to the effect that what they're trying to accomplish, the worse it is for performance. Here's an example from one of our competitors. There was a guy I worked with at GE. He went to another part of GE, kind of the asset manager broker part of the business. So we were now a supplier to him. And so we're our competitors. And one day he calls me and he says, hey, yeah, and he would sometimes tweet me, hey, those guys are really good, your competitor, you know, we really like them. And one day he calls me and says, hey, I got some info on your competitor. Oh, really? What's going on? Like, they're doing this great thing. What is it? Well, they're taking the best mechanics. Back up a little bit. Remember saying it's kind of hard to, sometimes units will come in different condition. So there's a feeling in aviation, people milk it all the time, right? You know, they're going to take, you can say whatever, because this unit, oh, it was oil soaked, it took me longer, that's why it took longer. You know, when you're welding, it's not new make, it's repair. You have different dimensions all the time, so it's going to take different setups, and I have to grind this part out a little more. So it's a lot harder to be on top of something like labor, which is kind of why I think it's not a great idea to really go after and track it really hard. Well, anyway, they were thinking, guys are milking, what can we do? They took the best employees, said, we're going to put them on piece pay. Every unit you got the door, we're going to give you a little kicker. We're going to give you a little bonus. Now, I mean piece pie, I don't mean pumpkin pie as a piece, I mean Frederick Taylor as a piece. I'd much prefer that type of piece pay, but they went with the other one. So, you know, and a couple questions from them. I said, all right. I'm already thinking, wow, this is going to be a disaster, right? So, it's like, all right, so what do you do about warranties? Hey, I shipped it fast. Oh, well, they have an adjustment for that. Okay, all right. What about, warranty percent? Well, you know, sometimes a warranty, the cost could be the driver, not just the number of warranties. Well, they have an adjustment for that too. Okay. What about, hey, units are different. They're kind of like us. They do lots of parts. What about when the valve guy comes in and he says, starters are so easy. He can just flush those through. Valves come in horrible shape and harder to do, and so they're up and down. Yeah, they make an adjustment between like the valve department, the starter department. Okay. What about new fleets versus old fleets? Hey, you got that big contract with FedEx, let's say. They have an old fleet. Their units just aren't as good. Well, so-and-so, you know, his parts are the new fleet. They take that into account. Okay. What about repaired parts? They're not the only ones, the mechanics there are the only ones putting labor on the job. What about when you send something to the machine shop for repair? Oh, they take care of that. They adjust that. Okay. Well, going down the list, you know, keep going. What about flat rate? Oh, they also would pay based on margin too, how much you're going to make on it. So you might have a flat rate job. Hey, we agree that, you know, we have a flat rate versus time and material. Maybe, isn't that gonna cause someone to order more parts, put it on to raise the invoice and get more money? Yeah, they adjust that too. Well, what if a guy grabs only the units he likes to get, like a good unit, like on a starter, you can go up and turn the crank on the top, and if it doesn't turn, you know it's a bad unit. You're like, oh, this is gonna be a disaster, it's gonna be awful to take apart and everything. You turn one that kind of turns, this one's gonna fly through. So what about when they just grab the good units? Well, they kind of monitor that. Okay. What if they only do the disassembly of assembly? I think the guy's out, but it's quoted and it's approved, and then that guy finishes it. Well, they only give them half, and they. All right. So I think what they thought they were doing was this, right? Like, duh, of course this is how you do things. But I think what they ended up with is this. And in all honesty, this supplier, and there were other things going on too, and it's not just attributable to this, but their market position crumbled in a couple years. And, this is one of those unknown and unknowable effects. They had their best people and their supervisors. What do you think they were working on all the time? The equation, right? They made these adjustments. They didn't think about all these. They went, as people went in and said, hey, what about this? What about this? They spent their time, tampering, working on keeping that equation updated and fair and so forth. Instead of thinking about what's the best thing for this unit, what's the best thing for the customer. So, when he told me about what they were doing, I honestly was pretty happy. I'm like, man, it's not going to go well for them. And that kind of looks like, almost like the never-ending search for the lurking variable. Well, we're adjusting this, and now that we add this in, it changes this percentage over here. Well, no, we need another one that change this percentage over here. I think it's Dan Pate that said, or could be Alfie Cohen too. Pay people well, get their mind off money, and not on the work. Don't let them think about everything. What am I doing today to make sure that I'm optimizing the equation? And well, if I ship this one early and grab this unit instead of that one. That's a complete waste of time. Another thing Dan said that I really like: contingent incentives, dull thinking, and block creativity. And it's one of the most robust findings in social science. Over and over, see that when they do experiments, when they give contingent incentives, performance, except for very easy tasks like stuffing envelopes, performance drops. And this has been shown over and over and over and over. Yet, a lot of companies continue to harm and do unknowable harm by putting in all sorts of contingent incentives. And again, the bigger they are and the closer they are, to the action, the worse the effect. You're going to meet the number any way you can. And if you can't, that's going to demoralize you. But if you can, like the game with indirect labor versus direct labor, I'll go on the job here and I'll go there. It's a game, and they know it. And they're going to think less of you and your knowledge. Really. So my M1 speed sensor example. If you're actively managing certain metrics, you're going to crush innovation. You're going to crush experimentation. Again, it's an unknown and unknowable effect when you crush experimentation. I would have been happy, oh wow, if we could reduce turn time by 20%, that still going down, cost is still going down. Performance appraisals. Again, for those newer to Denny's thinking and thinking in other parts of psychology, Denny's said, hey, just stop doing it. They're destructive, they try to accomplish too many things, they instill fear, the way they're done, their rating and comparison, and they're not pro-learning and pro-improvement. So he says, hey, just stop doing it. And, I've got this cartoon that I think kind of is a criticism. In his review, says, what do you mean by doesn't take criticism well? He says, well, this is a perfect example. I say, one little thing, you go all nuts on it. Trap is set. So that's kind of the thought that people have sometimes that, what performance appraisals are. Yes?
So how have you applied and not applied?
Yes.
Sort of the issue? Where does this sit in your organization right
Well,
now?
we started out, when I got there, said, I'm not doing it. So I just stopped doing it. We didn't do it. Yeah. We did union shop at the time. And I might say that one of the only good experiences I had about working, with a union versus non-union, is that the union had set wages, the union had, it was all in the contract. So they didn't care that much about a performance evaluation, right? So it was a little easier to just go, I'm not doing it. And again, I think this is one of the learning opportunities. Over time, then we were, private, started getting, hey, how come, haven't been reviewed, that type of thing. And we just weren't providing enough feedback to everybody. So you can eliminate them, and yes, you say, hey, just get, better just to get rid of them. And in my experience, you need to fill it with something. Although there were still some people that were fine with not getting it. You're small, you're still talking to people, but some people wanted a formal feedback. So they wanted something. Say, hey, I want to see what do you consider important and how am I doing, that type of thing. So we did some basic things around that. When we were private. Now we're part of a large corporate entity. We have to do their corporate HR approach. I was talking earlier to Dick Steele, and I was telling him, hey, the way it is now is actually better than it was, let's say, 3 years ago. 3 years ago was a number. Hey, you're a 4.2, right? You're a 2.8. And the problem with that is everyone, there's lots of issues with it. The first is raters are different. Hey, he gives all threes. His baseline's a 3, and he varies from there. Someone else says, no, I start at 2 and vary from there. Then there was inflation, and they tried to recalibrate. Okay, no, this is what a 2 needs. Well, then the people that got 3.4 last year are now angry that they're a 2.6. Yeah, but it means, something different. Well, no, I'm still angry. I'm a 2.6. It's in the file. Okay, but it's good. Couldn't agree more, really. So, besides the fact that then also it was being set up as, oh, well, if you get above a 3, you might get a bigger raise, that type of thing. What they've gone to now more is categories. You're a solid performer, you exceeds expectations, you need, in need of, or needs improvement, that type of thing. I think there's 4 or 5, but it's much better, and pay is more market-based, market rate-based pay. You're within, 80% of the range, that type of thing. So it's much better than it was before. And we're also trying to make it so it's not a surprise. That's kind of the number one rule. When you sit down, they're going to have heard everything already that is already going to be discussed. So, advice there is to try to make it as much of a formality as possible. We have to do it, we have no choice. But honestly, I thought last year and this year went, about as well as it could, considering, you've got to fill everything out. So, that's kind of where we're at this point. But my experience was that when we eliminated it, we just didn't have enough. Boy, with 1,000 different parts, it's hard to say, well, what's important for this guy? And our ERP system is old, so we just couldn't go in and design your own reports and everything, so it was hard. You do a monumental effort to get the data out 1 month, and you go, oh my gosh, we have to do that again, and again, and again, and again, and again. So it's hard to keep up with the amount of feedback we really want to give to just eliminate performance appraisal. Back to the three sources power. Of course, these three are not mutually exclusive. Deming says to focus on number 2 and number 3, but of course, number 1, really, if you focus on that too much, you're just going to get compliance. However, you do have to use number 1, authority of office, because there are policies and procedures in your company. And a lot of times, the people in charge, they're the ones who can change it. So you have to use the first one to change the system. Number 2 and 3 is to figure out what you want to change and to get agreement on, hey, let's try to improve things, and then what do we have to do? All right, I'm authorizing whatever change it is. They all kind of work together. Also part of, like I said, part of being a leader is transformation. That's what you're supposed to use the 3 sources of power to do, transform your organization. Also part of that is encouraging education, providing training. I want to talk a little bit about training and education. And this has grown substantially as the company has grown. So we started with 35 people or so in 2002. We're 135 now. We were a $7 million company. Then we're a $65 million company now. We were 7% operating margin then. We're 20% operating margin now. So we've had good growth in sales, good growth in income, and a lot more people. And now 2 shifts. So a lot of training, education could be done before informally. Walk around, let's talk about this, hey, have you thought about this, that type of thing. You knew everybody really well, obviously with that few people. As you grow, I don't know who's that guy again, we just started last week. I don't know him very well, right? So training and education, the more formal type, kind of has to increase as your company grows. And really kind of the 3 areas: improvement training, degree programs, and really that means any type of outside. If someone wants to take a class, there's up to $5,000 a person per year. Someone wants to take advantage of an outside class. But we've also supported, some people have wanted to get advanced degrees. So we've said, okay, we'll pay, up to $50,000 for that. And, we just want some type of agreement that, you'll stick around for a little bit. And that hasn't been a problem. Also, first-line supervision. I really can't emphasize that enough. You can talk about things and say things, but the people, the vast majority of your people they're interacting with their immediate supervisors the most throughout the day. And, you know, they can scuttle all your, you know, brilliant thoughts and ideas and the way you're hoping your organization runs and projects itself. So first line supervision is very important to make sure they get the right training. You know, we definitely, boy, we did a survey. There was a corporate survey done, went to each place, and you know, without getting into what I thought were issues with the survey, one of the things we saw is, wow, we have a problem with first line supervision. So we really worked a lot with them, and we did another survey this year, came out, and, you know, scores improved dramatically. I mean, definitely statistically, statistical signals would say, hey, you know, you're definitely much improved. And really, I've got to attribute that, one of the reasons is what we did with first line supervisors, how they're interacting, what they're saying, what they're focusing on, what they're doing. So yeah, one of my, which I'm sure people have heard before, but one of my favorite comments on training and education, the CFO says to the CEO, what happens if we invest developing our people and then they leave us? So, you know, we're wasting our money. The CEO says back, well, what happens if we don't and they stay? It's very true. I mean, do you want people that you haven't invested training in, that are, you know, part of what you want to do as an organization? Yeah, they might leave, but if you don't give them training, maybe you don't want them to stick around anyway. You know, one of the biggest issues I see is, you know, there's a good answer to every problem, or, you know, a good way to approach something. But really the biggest constraint in an organization is time. We could all sit here and say, oh, what's the proper approach to handling this or handling that? And when you get down to it, there's so much going on, you're like, wow, to tackle all this, there isn't enough time. You end up prioritizing everybody. You have to prioritize. Time is, you know, it's the most precious resource you have. So wasting it with unproductive actions like measurements that just drive gains in the company, you know, unproductive actions, incentive plans, when people aren't focusing on the work anymore, they're focusing on the incentive. That's a huge waste of time. And if you're wasting your people's time, you know, you can have additional time, not just your time applying things, but their time too, solving problems. So you can gain time by eliminating some of the nonsense things that go on. You know, if we had set up labor standards on the Inland Speed Sensor, there's no way that we would have gotten the experimentation and the improvement we got. Just not a chance. And again, you know, the way I see it, it's like, what? That means that, hey, a leader has already office knowledge and personality, persuasive power, and tact, and they go, now, well, how do you gain number 3? You know, you are who you are, right? But honestly, I think if you work on 2, and you gain knowledge, what to do, that's going to make sense to the people that work for you. And you're automatically going to gain some persuasive power. You're not doing things that waste their time. You're doing things that focus on the customer and the market. You're going to gain persuasive power automatically. So I think things begin with 2, they wrap into 3, and then you change things through step number 1. And again, I was saying, hey, it creates atmosphere. Well, what kind of atmosphere does it create? Well, it really creates one of trust. That's really what you're trying to do from the outset. trying to create an atmosphere where employees trust each other and trust management, and management trusts employees. You know, I guess typically, right, studies show that companies with a high level of trust in employees also perform the best. If you ever start performing well, I'll trust you too. This didn't go the way I hoped. So what kind of scam are you trying to pull? Well, yeah, that's kind of working the reverse. So establishing an atmosphere of trust, people's interest comes out, their focus comes out. We saw it in the example I gave earlier. And that's really what you're trying to do, transforming a company, is establish trust, and that's going to lead to interest and focus. And that, you know, you're going to have innovation. You're going to have innovation in your process, people involved in your market. You might get innovation in your product too. And you know, the long-term survival of your company really depends on innovation in the long run. You know, I want to leave you kind of with one last thought. So when I kind of approach, hey, what are we going to do here? You know, if we're going to change something in the company, you know, I kind of think that this quote is apropos. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Sometimes, you know, I fall for it too. Sometimes we spend too much time saying, well, that's bad. What we did there is bad. It really should be focused on, sometimes it's better to just add the new, and then people realize, oh, that other stuff, you know, that doesn't make any sense. And sometimes things can fall away. You know, we kind of did that a little bit with labor standards when I got there. There were numbers set up on a lot of stuff, and we just started doing things in a little different way, and next thing you know, it just weren't that important anymore. There wasn't a big announcement about, this is bad, this is not going to work, and we're not going to do this anymore. We're just going to introduce this new way also. Yeah, those standards are still in the system, and that's fine, you can look at them and stuff, but all of a sudden, I'm not asking questions about it. Well, those questions aren't rolling down as much. All of a sudden, it's not as important. And then over time, they're not even getting updated. Well, now you can't really use them anymore, unless they're getting updated, right? So, yeah, that's kind of the last thing I want to leave you with is that to try to focus on building the new. Yeah, there are going to be cases where you do have to also eliminate the old right away. And sometimes you can just kind of build it on top and let the old part kind of crumble away. So thanks, really enjoyed this, and be happy to take any questions.
Hi. Two questions.
Yes.
One is, how many, you said the frontline supervision was key to improvement. How many frontline supervisors do you have, percentage of, over the floor employees?
Well, we've got about 12 of them, over about 78, about 80, 75 or 80 people below them. So it's probably, you know, 1 per 7.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Second question is, it seems like your measurements, you didn't talk a whole lot about what you're specifically doing, but it seems like your measurements are more the P&L variety than, I mean, I'm hearing some of the stuff that you say is important to measure is stuff that, where I come from, we're measuring all the time. So I'm wondering, you know, performance is up, profitability is up, volume's up, all that stuff's up. Is that basically the way you guys look at performance measures for the company? Or are there anything more specific that you use?
Well, you know, no, there's more. There's more things we look at. But, you know, turn time's a big one for us. That's really important for our customers. Warranty, any warranty, right? That's probably the number one really is any type of warranties we had. So we're always trying to extend. For instance, we offered 12-month warranties as standard when we were, 15 years ago. We're at 36-month warranties now because we're getting better. Our warranty rate dropped so much, we're half of 1% of any type of return for any reason, which in our industry is pretty good. I mean, yes, we'd like to get to zero, of course. But, standard, or, 4 or 5% is mentioned a lot. So we've been able to drop our warranty rate and extend our warranty terms. And that's really a big one. Now, on this product that I showed you the example, our warranty rate was already good. We were just having lots of rework and surprises and scrambling to get units out the door. But it was good already. So in this one example I showed you, the things they were upset about, the customer was upset about in this particular case was turn time and the cost, the surprise costs. They're like, yeah, you're not getting any returns, and that's why we're still sending you units, your approved supplier, and so forth. But we do, warranty's a big one, and extending warranty terms. Turn time's a big one. So it just depends on the product. Something we try to do with airlines, but they just don't give us the data enough, and then people change, and then they change their POs, and you don't get the data anymore, is cost per total flight, total cost per ended flight hour. Well, there's a lot that goes into that, logistical costs, your warranties, your return. That takes a coordination between you and the customer, and it's been difficult, really, a lot of times because of the customer. You can't get the right data to make any headway. Because something we say we'd like to do, hey, let's do your total cost over time, and maybe we'll find that when we replace this part, yeah, it costs $500 more, so you're getting 2,000 hours more flight time. And then you can say to the airline, is that a good trade-off you want to make? Here's the case. And they might go, hey, that looks great. Or they might say, no, that doesn't work for A, B, and C reason. So anyway, I don't know if that goes anywhere towards answering the question. Go ahead, over there.
Well, in your example, I kind of got the feeling that it was a fail-forward process. So in the experimentation, there is a lot of failure and a lot of time. And in a larger organization, smaller organization, you may be able to identify that those people are actually working in a positive direction by failing forward and doing experimentation. But in other companies, it may be very larger companies, it may be very difficult to identify those areas versus areas that might have some other personnel issue going on.
Right.
And companies like that too. So I'm wondering, how do you differentiate when you actually go in and look more carefully, or do you have a hands-off approach and a certain amount of time to go in and check? Because you need to have that, it's wonderful to have the leeway of being able to experiment and fail forward.
Yeah, that's really a good point, is when you start looking at it, intervening, and a lot of that was happening and we didn't know it. Because we're not looking at labor standard variances a lot. So it was like we started looking at costs, and we're arguing with our supplier about electron beam welding and so forth. And then there was a point we started looking at other things, and saying, well, maybe someone's having more success than someone else, and there could be some training things. Maybe the new guy is doing something a little different. So then we started looking and going, well, let's see if we can see. And we go, wow, what happened? What's going on here? Meanwhile, they were already, by the time we were looking and learning about it, the improvements were already coming. Well, I'm almost done with this, fixture in the oven that's going to stand upright, that type of thing. So I think from ignoring it, I guess, they were doing it. But yes, there was a point where we were starting to look at it to try to go, well, what can we learn, looking at all the data for improvement purposes. So, but yeah, that's a good point. A larger organization, you know, there isn't going to be that type of leeway, but that's, you know, part of what the transformation is supposed to be, even in a large organization, is, you know, look at all the time they waste with all the people doing things. But
Like earlier, you spoke about direct labor, indirect labor, variance, manufacturing variance stuff. I get into it once in a while with my finance folks about manufacturing variance. We do a lot of that stuff. I report on these things. It's
yeah,
very spirit crushing.
yes,
Among other things, I could punch myself in the face every time I write one of these reports. And I get back from them, well, hey, we're a standard cost company. We use time standards to value inventory. Can you please talk about how you moved away from time standards and all that stuff? How do you start that conversation? Like, well, no, we don't need it because.
well, you know, and that is a good point. In our business, we don't store, it's not like you, okay, 75 to 80% of the direct costs, probably 80% or more. If you just looked in our system and said, well, what type of cost is on this unit? The vast majority of it is parts cost. So, and what we have in our inventory is almost all raw piece parts purchased. Once it's consumed, a lot of units don't sit waiting. Well, actually, we don't pull the parts till it's quote approved. So we either have raw parts or finished parts. Yeah, there's some, you know, there's WIP, but it isn't a lot. So it is easier for us to do that. Like, hey, we're standard cost. You know, now that gets into, well, what's your accounting system? And let's get into, you know, okay, as a small business owner, you know, at the time, you're trying to manage cash, right? That's what you do. And you quickly learn that, I'm paying this guy anyway, right? Doesn't matter if he's on the indirect or the direct. In the long run, yes, the way we do accounting next month or, you know, for the quarter, yeah, it could impact it if you're doing standard costing. But in the long run, it's going to all even itself out. Now, you know, that is a problem. You get into systems thinking and the way you do accounting and, you know, I know period constraints and things like lean, they have ideas around, well, to show how standard costing actually inhibits improvement efforts. Because a lot of times things look worse at first by the standard method. And people don't want to, you know, they're incentivized to, hey, you can't take that hit, even though in the long run it might be better. So I don't really have a good answer for that, but I've seen different solutions to say, well, there's another way to look at this. Another way to look at the accounting versus standard cost. But it would be an issue. But for us, the way our inventory is, the way our cost structure is, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. So that's why it was easier for us.
This will be the last question. Anybody else over here? Or okay. There's one out there. Come on. Right over here.
Hi, I'm going to go back to the cost again,
Yes.
because I think that's a very timely subject these days. One of the earliest difficult lessons I learned about running self-managed teams that tended to reduce costs of manufacturing was that when I was in an environment where we had a budget, we actually proved, especially with the blessing from finance, that we had reduced costs. The next thing that happened was we were asked to reduce our workforce. So I learned not to improve processes
Absolutely.
with evidence that we had reduced costs. How did you overcome that problem?
I mean, the way I look at it is we have a cost base of our people, our employees. And I want to free up as much time as I can for them to have them do other things. Because there isn't enough time to do everything. And if you go into it saying, I need to reduce cost, and really you're going to eliminate people, then that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to eliminate people. So you're going to have a reduction in force anyway, right? I mean, and no one's going to, once fool me once, right? And they're not going to do it again. So that's just a management decision and approach. And, you know, I honestly think I'm probably wrong here, but there are a lot of people and organizations that won't do that, that actually won't, that say, you know what, yeah, that's not a good idea. If we link an improvement close to a layoff, that's not a good idea. In our organization, we had a cost base, right? And again, I kind of look at it, if anybody's familiar with theory of constraints, a systems view, you know, you've got your parts coming in minus your variable cost, so that's your cash in the door every time you get a part in. And all those better add up to more than your cost base. And then you measure it by your constraints, so you're not concerned, you know, yes, if you lose enough business, you go, oh, my cost base is too, but that, you know, that's just a leadership issue. If someone's going to do that, it's a leadership issue, period. You don't have people go out to improve something just to then lay them off. No one's going to do it again. So I don't know how to answer that other than people are going to get called out on that if they do it. So we just didn't do it that way. I know that doesn't give you a roadmap, but, you know.
We'd like to thank Kevin for his aspirational As a reminder, you're all welcome to continue this conversation with Kevin. Across the street at the Hampton Suites, the fellowship activities area will continue in the lobby area. Once you enter the hotel, which is across the street, just bear to the right. I'd also like to make sure as you file on your way out, take a look at the work that Greg has been doing while we have been listening to Kevin. Greg has been listening to Kevin as well, and also letting his hands do some amazing things. I'm sure as you were watching that, it was pretty amazing, right?